Man, David, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're pulling off the famous dual podcast.
We are. The last time we did this, we were in a studio with the Digital Wildcatters, and if memory serves correct, was I Jake and you were Colin, or was it vice versa?
I'm not.
I think I might have been Colin. I think I might have been Colin because I think I wanted to like punch people and like wrestle people and make some memes. So it's good to see you, Mark. How have you been?
Dude, it's been nuts over the last, I don't know. It feels like we haven't seen each other like in person in forever. Obviously the world has gone crazy and since we last spoke, and I think you've done a great job of highlighting aspects of that. And we've been, heads down building companies over here.
So because we're doing a joint podcast. So Mark, with his new company, who he's going to talk about, Mark and I have known each other for a number of years. Serial entrepreneur, wonderful builder of businesses, and sold Q Engineering, who some of you may have heard of, to Inveris, who at the time was DI. And then Mark Bohorich has left to do his current role, which, Mark, why don't you share? And I know, again, for the different listeners, but it's worth, the host never really tells anyone what they're doing. So, right? Like, we're just sort of like making noise, and it's always about the guest. So let's do it.
Totally right. So Cloudbreak is a venture studio, which is a new concept that basically means that we build companies and sit right in between an incubator and a venture capital company. I think a lot of venture capital, especially early stage, can tend to take board seats. We are fractional managers of the company until we get to the hard part, which is early revenue. Only 5% of companies historically make it to that milestone, and we are hoping to build a repeatable process to get lots of email spreadsheet-based workflows to turn into software companies to start changing the world.
And if I recall correctly, you're doing this in part with your wife, yes?
Yes, my wife, and we have a third partner. A deep bench of talent where we have actually developers on staff, and we're 3 products in so far. So things are moving.
It's awesome. Well, I mean, I guess the good news about coronavirus is you were locked in a house with your spouse anyway. So knowing you were probably like, hey, would you mind doing this? Would you mind adding this? Would you mind twisting this? Or maybe it was vice versa. She was like, hey, Mark, I'm going to need you to do this and build this and do this. And I need you out of the house after selling Q Engineering and being here. Like, literally, I can't have you here anymore. So do something.
Yeah, I think it was a mix. I mean, there was a significant amount of convincing her, actually, like, hey, we should work together. Her first answer was some version of no, like we can leave the adjectives out, but it was definitely some version of no. And then after bugging her about it for long enough, she and I decided to give it a go.
Well, good. That's exciting. And what's the 3 to 5 year plan? I'm curious.
So first, we have to prove that what we're doing is translatable and scalable. In other words, can we launch three businesses a year? And if we can maintain that pace, how do we make sure that we've got enough capital and people and all of that growing? But before we get there to 3 to 5 years, it's really about getting revenue out of the first one and turning that into a viable business on its own. So it's one step at a time until we figure out how to pull it off.
Well, and I'm going to turn the mic over to you, but I do have one more question because it's relevant right now. Governor Abbott, although Texas hasn't exactly been closed, I went into Midland. I think I told this story before, but I went into Midland and I walked into like one of the restaurants, which shall remain nameless so I don't get them in trouble. But they basically said, sir, you're going to need to take your mask off if you want to come in here. And I was like, you better believe I'm going to take my mask off to come in here. And today, Governor Abbott said that like capacity restrictions gone and mask mandate gone. I know South Dakota's already there. I think Iowa's already there. Florida's already there. The Republican states are opening up. Do you think there's going to be a difference where you are, or the Democrat mayor is going to still hold the man down and try and hold the power?
I think Houston politics in general, there has been a little back and forth between Governor Abbott and the local authorities here. I'm not smart enough to know which way it's going to go, but I think in general it takes more than just the people in power to adopt and really change. And I know that I think a lot of people are just done with coronavirus, especially after the freeze.
Yeah, well, it's going to be super interesting because again, like once the thing started crumbling, and I think that now we're like, I mean, I've been saying to a lot of friends, I thought April 1st was going to be it because cases are plummeting, people are tired of the mask, it's getting warm, and we're all like, what are we like? Come on, don't stop treating us like stupid people, and the backlash is going to be pretty severe. So, awesome, I love me some Texas and Governor Abbott back on my top 5 governor list.
Oh, good. Well, I'm sure he's really excited to be on your top 5 list.
It's important. You don't want to be on DRW's wall of shame with Amex and Avis. It's a very, very dark and cold place. I stare at you on my wall saying, shame on you. Anyway.
There it is. Well, as we're, as we're apt to do at this point, I think it's probably appropriate to dig into questions as you get into post, career life. You sold your company, you're moving forward and really trying to understand, what makes a lot of these things work and really highlight and show maybe some lack of transparency or lack of follow through on a lot of public things. What's starting a business as been like for you, and then what would you say is really beyond your initial thought of where you would be?
So I mean, I know that doing the bootstrap thing. So I've started like 3 businesses, all with partners, all had varying degree of success. And the lesson I learned certainly in the first one was expenses equal bad, revenue equals good. And so it's kind of interesting because in the first startup, we had office space, but we were spending like 25 grand a month in 2 different cities to like have an office that no one went to. And so, obviously technology's come a long way, but we didn't need to do that pre-revenue. And so then in our second business, we really didn't do that at all, but then ultimately grew too big and needed a big office. Sure. And then the third one, which was One Energy, which was the most successful for us, ended up like it was 4 partners in 4 different cities. And so our big mantra was we could always have any meeting in any oil and gas city effectively within 30 minutes. Yeah. And we used technology. And so we were really able to keep some of those ridiculous costs down, travel costs down, and we focused on growing the business. And so whenever I talk to entrepreneurs, like you don't need a car and you don't need an office and you don't need a travel budget and you don't need a software budget per se. You need to get past is this going to work? And then build it as the plane is flying. That way you de-risk things a little bit.
Well, it's certainly the model we're following at Cloudbreak. I think we have a lot of aspiration about where we're heading, and a lot of those aspirations are contingent upon how good we are at it. So we've been very picky in getting going and making sure that we have a lot of buy-in or potential buy-in from our customers. And it's I think building the plane while flying it is an apt description of what it should look like. I think in both of my businesses so far.
Yeah.
So building the plane while flying it. Did you ever really feel like you were also crashing it in your most recent venture? And what was your mind like as you were working through that?
So no, we were very fortunate. Like, I mean, and I say this all the time, and I know that the Guy Raz, How I Built This, which is a phenomenal podcast. I know a lot of people listen to it, and he always says, was it luck or skill? Yeah. And I mean, the skill element is you clearly need to put yourself in the right place, and you need to have the right team, but more importantly, you truly need to have the skills to build what it is you're building. Like you need to understand, and this is going to sound arrogant, and I know you've heard me say it, and it's in the book, But like when
Right.
I graduated university, I wanted to be the Tiger Woods of oil and gas. Now we can debate whether I achieved that or not, but like I was really good at what I did. And
Right.
so, but you had to overlay that with the perfect timing of buying the asset, the perfect timing of selling the asset. And you had to have good things happen between. And I know like a software company like what you built versus an oil and gas company like what we built is very different, because I feel like, at least from my process, I knew what the wells were going to do. I knew what the type curve was going to be. I knew the range of the capital. I knew
Sure.
the range of the price. And so once you bought the deal, if you bought it well, you would do well. Whereas
Yeah.
in your case, right, you're spending so much money and you're building clients and you're getting sales and you're growing and working capital. And it's like, it's this machine. And then finally you get to the point where someone wants you. And it must almost be like a surprise to sell. But for One Energy, for me, it wasn't. So I never really felt like we were crashing. The
Right.
crash for me, if there was a crash, was post career. And in two different ways. In the first phase, where I stayed with the buyer for a year, great group of guys, love them, super happy for the team. The asset's doing amazing. They're going to crush it, and it's going to deliver on all the expectations we said when we sold, which is key. But
Yeah.
when I left that, the crash was like, and now what do I do now? You
Yeah.
know, what's my relative value, my relative importance? And that's how I kind of accidentally happened into this podcasting and blogging, which has grown far beyond what I intended it to be.
Love it. Love it. So, as you look at some of the recent transactions kind of in the public space for media companies, and I think the shift away from more traditional mainstream media sites like newspapers towards things like Substack, where you can basically source your own content, and the content can be excellently niche is really the way I think about it. Like really focused on one area, knowing that if you know what you get when you sign up for something like that. How has that journey been as you've coincided with the right timing at this point? Because I would argue that's almost software-like now.
Oh, from the media model, I think there's two things I would say. Number one, the media may have been unbiased many years ago. It may have been. It's absolutely unequivocally not. And I talk about this all the time. They have a narrative. They hand the script to their host. They have a 7-person panel debate that are all the same like-minded who all hate things. And consumers consume it in exchange for advertising revenue. And I believe that model has brought us to this point in society where A, we all hate each other if you're on the different side. B, we're not very good at listening. And C, we all take to social media to rant and rave instead of having like in-person conversations with people that we know. And I believe that now the Substack is going to move from a company-based narrative to a person-based narrative. So you're going to trust the commentator, like a Glenn Greenwald as an example, like a Barry Weiss, the former New York Times editor, like a David Ramsden Wood, where you don't always agree with them, but you believe that they're doing the work and laying it out in a way that you can make your own decision. And I think that, that's built a model where there's guys who are making 500,000 or $1 million a month on their subscriber list, sharing important data with the world. And I think that just blows away the media model personally. So, but it's very software like. You have to grow the base, and when do you turn it to monetizable, and do you sell ads, do you not sell ads? If I get too niche, I don't have enough people I can put in the channel. If I get too broad, then you're not like the experts, or people going to listen to you anymore. It's very challenging. How do you see the world from a consumer of data and media?
So, I think as a consumer, I value, like you're saying, the person and the perspective. So they kind of have to earn my trust in order for me to continue to consume their content. But I think that the bar has gotten so incredibly low that you really, it's not hard to find somebody that really knows what they're doing, really knows what they're talking about, and can publish relevant content that is really free from the overlord bias. Even something like Twitter is a great way to find somebody, especially anonymous Twitter accounts that will oftentimes give you an inside scoop on what's really going on in the middle of a major crisis.
Yeah.
That can easily be verified after the fact. And it's been, I think the world is changing a lot faster than it seems in the knowledge and media space.
The knowledge Twitter, like the anonymous Twitter, it does have a catch-22 though, right? Because
of course,
there is data that is being shared that shouldn't be shared.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people on social media like Elon Musk, who is arguably when you look at him tweeting 420 a share done financing, and then he only got a $10 million penalty from the SEC. The company got a $10 million. They had to split the chairman thing. They said that they would vet all his tweets, and then he's like, game stonk on. And then the market almost collapsed because hedge funds were naked covers and it was insane. And guys can move markets. And so, Chamath, and I never can pronounce his last name, but the SPAC king, which is there's nothing against him, so don't sue me. But it's it's the a SPAC is a Ponzi scheme with massive front end promotes. And yet he's just on there tweeting about, I made $1 billion this week. I lost $1 billion. It's not a big, blah. It's crazy what we've created with this world. So I hope
I didn't
we
say
move
all
away
content
from it.
was good, but it's a lot easier to find it. As you kind of backing up a little bit, walking through the, why media? What was the aha moment in the middle of the crash, coming down from a career that said, this is the way I have to go?
Well, see, this is the fun thing. So this is why I was excited. So for listeners, we're doing the dual podcast, and the thought was we were just going to go. Their format's a little different, but I don't really talk about this a lot, and it ties so well with my book. And as you know, I said your career is a river, and you never know what's coming. And so at the end of One Energy, we'd sold to the family office. I stayed for a year. For a lot of reasons, wasn't a fit, not a surprise. Awesome guys, awesome team, super excited. But for me personally, I had started writing this blog as a way to, quite frankly, get attention for the book, which is kind of laughable right now. And my mind was very active. And so I literally had things that were energy specific that I was writing about. And because I was writing the things that no one else could say, but they were all thinking, none of the ideas were particularly original, but they would go to work and their boss would be like, let's grow production and pick up rigs. And the employee would be like, but don't we have a lot of debt and aren't we doing layoffs? And isn't our rock kind of bad and we're drilling too tight? And then they'd be like, well, yeah, but don't worry about it. The market wants this. So I was able to say what they couldn't say. And that voice then became its thing. And so in the river of media, I kind of was accidentally pulled into this. But the reason I haven't gone back into oil and gas right now is I truly believe and say all the time, all the rock worth owning is already owned. So it's already in a capital structure. So I would have to not only raise money to go pull it out of a bad capital structure, which probably means I'm overpaying a SPAC where I'm purely betting on commodity. And number two, I fully believe the industry needs to be 10 consolidated companies managing the resource better and advocating better that energy, all forms of energy, especially oil and gas, are essential as part of our grid. So I can't make the case that I should go raise any amount of money and bifurcate the consolidation process with deconsolidation. Now, if I do consulting projects and stuff that if I can help an existing business, I'm all over it. But you don't need me buying $300 million of assets just to sell back to another guy. Yeah. And that's not enough capital to go be a meaningful player. And I still haven't heard back from Exxon as to whether they want me to be the CEO. They certainly didn't want me on their board, but they put two green activists on their board whose goal is to decommission the company. So riddle me that, Joker. But anyway, so that's how media, it was very accidental and happenstance. But I love it. I mean, I'm very glad I have a podcast. I love the blog. I love the interaction. So that's how we got there. Why you in construction? Why did you pivot from what you had been doing?
Yeah. So I think for me, coming off of an area where I built an awful lot of expertise in oil and gas as a reservoir engineer, buying and selling oil fields, right? As you know, there aren't that many people that really know how to do that. And I was fortunate enough to do that at a time when the technology of managing and calculating those reserves was increasing. And so therefore the whole industry kind of had to adapt or die. And as most things usually go, that adaptation happened in Excel. And it doesn't take long for you to realize that an entire industry is using Excel to do the same basic calculations. I don't care how simple they are. I don't care what how quote unquote easy it is to manage. If you're managing a business critical process in Excel, you're doing it wrong in 2021. But for my first company, generating the first product to solve that spreadsheet, I was equipped to do that because I knew what I was talking about. I don't have that same luxury. I can't magically have 10 years of experience in another industry. But what I can do is I can share my story and what it was like to be me during that time. And I can find talent in a city like Houston that has to have the most spreadsheets per capita of any city in the country. And
probably.
And we started sharing the story and meeting some co-founders, and we're 3 investments in. One's construction, one's commercial real estate, and another one's offshore logistics. And so I'm really, taking what I learned in bootstrapping and starting a company from zero to revenue, and really applying that expertise and knowledge at this point, and really borrowing from the contacts and the expertise of our co-founders.
Let me ask you as this work from home, because I'm
Sure.
going to use the Texas ERCOT challenge. I'm going to use it for 2 reasons. Number one, the total lack of governance. The fact that the board can just resign after, and I appreciate that they did a shitty job. But then they're like, oh, we did such a bad job that it's getting in the way, so we're going to resign, which is to the point that boards of directors, the way we have them right now, are totally useless. And so I'm curious, as you think about your board of directors for your startup, how you think about that. So I'll stop with that one.
I can only really speak to the scale of organizations that I've been a part of. I think that as we built Q, we pulled together a board of advisors of people that knew, that had connections, that really maybe had run a software company before, other founders, things that, informally we would ask each other for advice and help, or hey, do you know this client, or how would you solve this kind of problem? It really informally, because I guess because I'm a millennial and we're in that ad hoc, natural feeling, kind of self-organization type class, that's what I found most helpful. But again, our business was small. We built to 15 employees before selling, and we have almost that many working with us now in Cloudbreak, but it's a different scale.
So then the related question is this work from home bootstrapping.
Right.
I blame, at least in part, the fact that in the winter preparedness, I think I read that only 16% of the sites were virtually visited to make sure they were ready for winter. And when I talk to people, especially now as Texas opens, as Colorado does, and it depends on the employee, obviously, but the number of people are like, I'm not really sure I want to go back. Or the number of teachers who are like, no, I quite like this. Because let's be honest, when you get to work from home, you get to walk your dog, get your kids ready, leave your computer on and have like something go, like the cat in the background that's constantly moving the thing, and get your kid to like hit the A button so that they know that you're there. But I blame the lack of productivity, the lack of consistency, the lack of actually focusing on your job as work from home. And I blame in part the power crisis on that. I'm curious your take on that.
All right, we just lost you. Got you back now, I think.
I just said I'm curious your take on, did work from home contribute? And would you set up a work from home, or do you look like you're in a big cavernous office? Looks like you have intention to be in an office. How do you think about that as starting a business?
So when we first started, we actually followed the One Energy model. We, our my wife and I obviously work in the same house, but our partner's remote. All of our kind of core development team was remote, and so I think early going, getting through that big trough of you don't really have anything until you've built something, and getting through that early part as we've transitioned into what's hopefully kind of the final stages there. It has made more sense for us to be centrally located, at least on the business development side. And we're excited about the office space that we're building out now, minutes from our house. And I think that, it was hard for me as an extrovert, as a people person, to be in a remote world. You can ask my wife how many times I drove her crazy being crazy. And I really think that for a subset of the population, you got to have an office. You got to go somewhere to talk to somebody, because not everything is controllable and predictable. I think the virtual conference game is a far cry from an in-person deal, and so
absolutely.
I think that's good.
Well, and I mean, I think about the key things: onboarding. I think about customer development. Like, I wonder how many major sales organizations whose sales cycle might have been April, May, June, July, and there was a renewal. I wonder how many companies were just like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just stick with you guys because it's easy. But I think it's going to be a knife fight for these organizations, and especially as we continue to see profits far exceeding expectations because there were no travel expenses and you could pass on all these costs to consumers based on whatever. But I think it's going to be a knife fight, and it's going to be an employment knife fight post-tense, because there's going to be a lot of people who are currently in jobs, but as soon as the coronavirus ends, I promise you, large organizations are going to do another round of layoffs. They've just been holding off on it so they don't look like dicks, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's another concurrent wave that's really building in the enterprise software space too. Enterprise software is a relatively recent phenomenon at the scale that it is right now. And a solution for every industry is literally being developed, worked on, built, sold. And it is eating the corporate world a lot faster than maybe is apparent from the outside, and it's certainly leading to the kinds of profits that we're experiencing. Going back to Adam Smith's kind of you have labor and you have capital, and then really thinking about how that's evolved is you have additional types of leverage in maybe software and even marketing, as I've heard some point out. I think the fundamental of economics hasn't really changed. I think that what's important really has, and maybe the old tools don't work as well as they used to.
What do you think the most disruptive enterprise software tool is right now?
I think honestly, this is a little bit nerdy, but the whole concept of the API, or basically a software structure whereby you can connect the key information inside that application to another application, as exploited by companies like Zapier. If you have a software, a very common white collar job function is to take key information from one system and copy it and put it into another system. And maybe while you're doing that, you're analyzing the information as it's coming, and you're saying, well, based on all the information that I've now pulled together, is this a good decision or not? That as that process becomes more and more seamless, and as more of these applications start to work well together, you end up needing less of those rote copy and report roles, and you end up with what's already happened in a lot of ways in some of the more intense field locations. Think about drilling. When you came on board, the industry, how different it was from when your boss came on board. And for companies that, in the 70s were drilling wells, they sent some young engineer out in the middle of nowhere, and there wasn't a way to call back home. So whatever decision had to be made out in the field was made right there and then by that person. And that lack of responsibility, now that the CEO or chief operating officer of the company has the ability to directly tap in and know exactly what's going on in the middle of nowhere through software, has allowed that onus of decision making has shifted way up in the structure. And the impact is that if you don't make decisions that are critical, then you don't earn that kind of maturity and that kind of maybe the battle scars that you get when you are making those decisions. I think that's the difference between whether or not you can handle yourself, no matter what comes your way.
It's funny that you mentioned like starting the career. I was thinking about this the other day. So when I first started on my internship when I was like 20, our department like literally didn't really have email. I mean, certainly like, like I sort of had an email, but like you didn't really use your email. And literally the job they hired me for as an intern was production data would come in from the field via like an Excel spreadsheet or a fax.
Sure.
But usually what they did was they took it in Excel, they printed it, then they faxed it. And then my job was to re-enter the data that was already on a spreadsheet into a thing. So day one, I convinced them to send me the Excel file. And day two, I wrote a macro that imported the data with a click of a button. It just formatted things and shoved it in. And as long as the format was good, it worked. And then like day three, I was like, okay, that's the job that you had the person do for 16 months before me. What would you like me to do now? Yeah. And they're like, and so to be honest, that's how I ended up in business development, because they're like, I don't really know what you should do now. What do you want to do? I'm like, well, I think I'm pretty good at valuing companies. I should do that. They're like, yeah, you should definitely do that. And then they go back to the office and they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do for the next 16 months? And the next thing they know, I come back with like a presentation of, here's a company I think we should buy. They're like, you don't even work here. I'm like, I know, that's the best part. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I had such a similar story with my intern year. And, my first company, I was the only engineer under the age of 40 at the time. And it just, I think that was that fortunate intersection of the rate of change of technology in the field, getting things done, and maybe my career just really learning at that pace. It's kind of addicting when you are growing as fast as things are changing, and I don't think I can really be in a spot where that's not the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally, and that's the thing. You asked earlier, like, what was the crash like? The crash, and I'm sure a lot of people in our industry and in other industries, when they're pivoting, like going from a role of importance where people have to talk to you to a role where you have no value to them because you're not buying anything. Now, from LinkedIn, I'm thrilled when people reach out to sell me like petroleum products from Russia. I now respond with, I'm retired. But it's hard because you crash because you want to be engaged and learning. And so, for me anyway, as much as anything, like the hot take, like, and a lot of people, they're like, oh, you're not an epidemiologist. I'm like, well, Bill Gates isn't an epidemiologist. You listen to him. Like, well, that's because he does a lot of reading. I'm like, well, I do a lot of reading. Well, he's richer than you. Well, okay, but I still I mean, data is data, and I like researching and learning. And right now, the more I learn about utilities, as an example, the more terrified. I mean, I think a politician needs to run solely on solving homelessness, balancing the budget, and how utilities are incented to charge through any capital they want to, because there's a mandated rate of return. And that to me is insane, that I knew it, but I didn't know it until the Texas crisis,
Yeah. I mean, I think you're probably not far off on that. I think one of the more interesting dynamics in terms of politics is just how differently our generation looks at the world than maybe our parents and certainly than their parents. And I think it takes a while for each generation to really kind of carve out what is their impact on the world. And we've got enough big problems and I think enough smart people to find something really interesting. I really like the Scott Adams law of slow moving disasters, and how every time humanity has seen something from a long time off coming at us, we've been able to adapt and solve it. And I think it gives me personally a lot of hope for the future, for sure.
Well, I'm glad to hear that because I lost a lot of hope and faith in humanity. I said a lot, especially in the back half of 2020, that I was long the market and short humanity
Yeah.
because we continue to do stupider and stupider things. However, I have to take ownership of some of that
Yeah.
because I haven't put my hand up and said I need to go into the political realm with a large enough platform to challenge these people who are driving the narrative and expose the alternate universe that exists.
Right.
And I hope I've been watching Designated Survivor. You're probably not as much of a TV watcher as I, but I enjoyed it. I loved 24. Like I binge watched 24 when it
Of
came out
course.
because it was the Jack Bauer was the greatest person ever. And the only thing Jack Bauer needed to do more of was he needed to call backup and trust like three people. If he just trusted three real people, the episode would have been 3 hours long. But in Designated Survivor, when all the politicians are wiped out and he has to rebuild, it's amazing what bipartisanship and agreement on like what the issues are and collaboration could do. And if only we could get back there. So I'm like kind of in favor of Kiefer being like the new president of the United States
Yeah.
and having everyone else resign. That would be great.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge 24 fan. I really think that anything that really delves into why we do things is really fascinating as a base for a storyline. And as an entrepreneur, it's a storyline that we intersect with on our own lives directly. What would you think? Just going down the path of really building real institutional knowledge and expertise in a particular field, then starting a company and then another company and then another company in that field, and then pivoting again towards media. What would you think is that golden thread of like, as you've become the entrepreneur, as you've gone through these pain points and and provided the market with solutions, what would you say is that golden takeaway for somebody listening to think about their own journey and whether wherever they are, whatever they might want to do, what do they need to know?
Almost every meeting is worth taking once.
Yes.
I think is a really key one because you truly never know either A, how that person today will impact you, but B, and far more importantly, how that person may impact you in a future career. And
Yeah.
so I think the golden thread in my career is, and there's a lot of people who dislike me immensely for a lot of reasons, both career reasons and then my social media presence. As you know, early on, I was horrible when people trolled me because it didn't
Yeah.
matter if they had 3 followers and weren't a non. They could make me bite constantly, and I would
Right.
I would chirp back in this sort of alpha male athlete way. That's like, okay, you want to battle, let's go. And so, but nonetheless, I think as you become in your career, you're very aware of your interaction with other people, and I think you treat everyone as fairly as you can, regardless of the contract, and you take every meeting once, and that will allow you in your river to have a much bigger network of opportunities and problems to solve. And then when there's a problem to solve, you see what happens. Like, I don't expect this is ever going to be Barstool Sports.
Yeah.
But I enjoy it and I do it as a hobby and I can do it and meet people while traveling, and it doesn't pay the bills per se, but in a relative sense it pays the bills. So I'm all in and I really enjoy it. So do something you love, take every meeting you can, and you never know where you're going to end up.
That's awesome. I think that this general market situation that we're in, I think with some of the dynamics that are going on with the companies, the social contract between the employee and the employer is very different than it was in the past, and you really owe it to yourself to put yourself in the best situation to execute and live your own dream. What do you say to somebody that's thinking about doing something entrepreneurial? What's your first go?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard because I think I'm so similar to you in that I didn't fit into the big company culture. But I also think that I was the accidental entrepreneur in that I kept getting to smaller and smaller companies because that was where I could have the biggest impact. So I guess the first thing I'd ever ask an entrepreneur is, why are you doing this? Like what is the problem that you personally are solving for yourself beyond the problem you're solving for your customers? Is this something you truly want to do? And then the second one is, can you afford to do it? Like, what's the risk rate of return of leaving your job? Colin McClellan talks about this. You're making 150 or 200 grand a year and you want to go do something different. Okay, well, what are the trade-offs and what's that rate of return like? And I would say the same for college. What is the rate of return of the decision you're making? And then you just sort of go from there. So I'm a lot more cautious than most entrepreneurs, encouraging other people to take the plunge, because I know that so few businesses actually work out successfully, especially monetarily. You might love the restaurant business, but if you bought a restaurant December 2019 with your life savings in oil and gas and you sold everything you had to do it, and then your business got closed, and then you sold the rest of your oil and gas stock in May to pay your rent, only to discover that from May to now, stocks are up 700%. The thing we haven't seen from coronavirus is the destroyed lives and finances, and quite frankly, suicides, because nothing feels worse than failure. Yeah. And so I think that those are the things I would challenge an entrepreneur for. And I know you know my test. So I'm even going to get you to say it, because it was the first time I'd ever heard myself quoted back to me on the Digital Wildcatters. You remember that? How do you know you're an entrepreneur? Step one, you got to ask all your friends. Yeah. Find a friend. Yeah. Step 2, ask them, am I an entrepreneur? And step 3, trust their answer.
Yeah. I think that's good stuff. I would edit just from my own experience. I think that finding a community of entrepreneurs, if you are the only entrepreneur then I would say you're at higher risk of going through some of those classic faults than if you are one of the entrepreneurs that And I think it's really important for that reason that wherever you are, you get in and alongside other people. And I think it can really kind of help smooth out some of those lows, and at the end of the day, you get somebody with which to share highs. I know when we each talked about our acquisitions, we were very excited for one another, and everybody I've gotten to talk to since then has, I know what that feels like, and it's a tough thing to describe how it feels unless you've kind of been through it.
Well, it's going to be a generalization, but I have found funny in the Twitter sphere talking about the anonymous people. So obviously, number one, anonymous, you don't have to stand behind your own track record. So you might be the worst day trader, and you might be like the lowest manager at some company, and you think you know everything, and you can say anything you want to whoever you want, right? But if you hate people that have success and you try and bring them down, I really question what it is about entrepreneurship that you enjoy. Because I think that that's exactly right. When I hear people are successful, and I'll make with the notable exception of the Moderna and Pfizer shareholders because of the coronavirus vaccine, I am not pleased with them. But if you started a business, took real capital risk where the government wasn't backstopping you, and then built a solution to a problem that people really needed, and you make money off that, I could not be happier for you, especially if you're the founder. The public company CEOs that make $100 million, because we overpay our CEOs so massively, and if we had more of an entrepreneurial mindset in our boardrooms and in our C-suites in companies, I think our country would be so much better for it. And I mean, like him or not, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, these guys, the Airbnb guy, I can't believe his valuation, but boy, they built a thing. I can't begrudge those guys. They built it. They win. They won the game of capitalism.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty exciting. are you willing to kind of have a chat and talk to entrepreneurs in your area? And if so, how are they supposed to reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I love that's one of the things that I really enjoy, and it's when I got banned from LinkedIn for saying the controversial thing that if you're young and healthy, you likely won't die from coronavirus, and in fact posted something from the CDC word for word that they highlighted as false information. But the thing I missed the most was not the writing; it was the people who reach out every day to ask, to bounce something off. Because as you know, there's nothing better than someone with a no dog in the hunt. Like if you're ever sitting at a bar while you're traveling, when that was a thing, and you talk to a stranger and that was a thing, and then they said, hey, here's what I'm doing in my career, usually without the emotional attachment, the answer is so much easier. So I love when people reach out, and I usually say, yeah, let's have a 15-minute call. I'll always take that call. And then, keep me posted in the next 3 to 6 months, how you've done, what you're doing. And I love it. So reach out, connect to me on LinkedIn. I accept all invites, including people who want to sell me petroleum products from India, a couple girls who want to talk to me offline about something very important. If I could just send them my email, that would be great. And people who wanted to send me pictures of things. I'm not totally sure what those are, but I accept all requests.
Well, I think it's a great thing for me. Anybody can reach out to me at mark@riskprofile.us. And I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'll take that invite too. David, what the next thing we have to decide is, when are we going to get to play some golf?
Dude, we're going to play this summer. I told you, I think April 1st, the inertia of the world wanting to open. Now, I still believe, you hear everyone on television, they're like, the reopen trade's going to be amazing. No, the reopen trade has already happened. And when everyone realizes how shitty it is and that no one has any savings and the stock market falls and everyone feels poor, that's when the real crisis will set in. But I believe that the April 1st is when things are going to open, and we are going to play golf in April or May in Houston. And we'll get a big crew together and we'll go do it.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, I can't wait for this country to open back up. Guys, this is looking forward to hearing feedback on this podcast. Please reach out to either of us. We will share, make fun of each other, do whatever it takes in order to move the ball forward. So thanks so much.
And I want to jump in there. Mark is such an exceptional builder of businesses, and he knows this. I was so thrilled when I heard that he'd got his business across the line, and whether you're an athlete or whether you're a business person or whether you're a parent or whether you're a grandma, being the best at something and being successful is incredible. And Mark's experience and knowledge and just serial entrepreneurship always shocks me. His energy is incredible, and he's a wonderful, wonderful resource and has been a friend for a long time. So I sing him high praises.
Well, thanks, David. I could say the same things back to you. Well, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.